I'm pretty sure that nothing else important this year is happening on November 5th. So EJ and I are going to be talking about the upcoming trade deadline. We've already had a couple big trades hit the wire this week with DeAndre Hopkins and Ernest Jones, but EJ and I have a couple different trade proposals, which we have not shared with each other yet, of trades that could happen for playoff contenders that we think make a lot of sense. So should be a fun show today. We're going to talk about what actually happened, what we think could and or should happen. But before we get to that, EJ, my wonderful partner, how are you?
I am well, and it is ramping up. Trade season is always fun. As you know, the idea sphere around football is always full of fanciful trades like, hey, why won't they give us their all-pro pass rusher for like a third and maybe a seventh next year? And you're like, because he's the face of the franchise and they just paid him like $40 million a year. This is a little bit more realistic. We were constrained. We didn't get to do the unicorn trade proposals. They actually have to fit reasonably under the cap with a little bit of machining here or there, but they should, in our mind, improve the team and give them something they need to put them over the top. So we really are looking at teams not building for the future, but who have a legitimate shot at competition this year and could use another piece, and this might be the one to put them over.
Yeah, so we're not doing a Dexter Lawrence trade in this show because Dexter Lawrence is not
All
getting
right, hang
traded.
On. No.
Did you really do Dexter?
No, did not.
I was like, that man's not getting moved. John Mara would rather sell the team than trade Dexter Lawrence at this point.
Rightfully
They got
so.
nothing else to sell tickets.
Yeah.
All right, before we get into talking about DeAndre Hopkins and Ernest Jones, I do want to thank Underdog for sponsoring today's show and every show this season. If you haven't done pick'ems this year, this is actually a pretty good time to do it because NBA started up. We still got baseball going, hockey, football. Like, this is the best part of the sports calendar because we got everything going at once. And right now, because basketball's going on, Wemby, at least I believe the day this show launches is going to be Friday. So Wemby is your new customer free pick on Friday and Saturday. Then we got a Dak Prescott free pick on Sunday. So if you've never done pick'ems before, you can get a free pick out of it. Try to get your toes wet a little bit, learn how everything works, and, have a little bit of extra entertainment while you're watching all these games. Of course, you also get a deposit bonus up to $1,000 as well if you use promo code BOOTLEG. You can do that either at the QR code on the screen or at the link in the description. Either way, up to $1,000 in deposit bonuses, Wemby free pick, Dak free pick, plus a whole bunch of stuff throughout the week. There's vulture protection, there's profit boosts. There's always something going on. So check that out if you want to make your sports watching days a little bit more entertaining. Now, in terms of watching the Chiefs, I think they're about to be slightly more entertaining because they just brought in DeAndre Hopkins for what a lot of people thought was a fairly inexpensive trade. For me, though, it kind of, how do I phrase this in a way that's not going to piss off Chiefs fans?
Can you?
I don't think I can because okay. I don't. There's expectations, right? Because it's the name. It's DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins is not the DeAndre Hopkins of 4 years ago. He's not even the DeAndre Hopkins of 3 years ago. That level of juice is not there. He doesn't have that step that he had, in his early on in Arizona, and certainly not later in Houston, right? Like that ability to stretch the field is not there. What DeAndre Hopkins brings to the table is reliability and physicality, right? He catches the ball. He's very good in terms of settling in holes in zone coverage. He plays Chiefs ball, right? He's going to fit right in as an on-ball receiver so that Xavier Worthy can stay off ball and do all their motion stuff and jet sweep stuff and be a vertical threat. But like DeAndre Hopkins is not going to walk in there and be, a top tier number one. He doesn't move like that anymore. But 2 to 3 third downs a game, he's going to be matched up against a corner one-on-one, and Patrick's going to throw him a back shoulder fade, and he's going to catch it, and the offense is going to keep moving. That is what they do really well. Like, they're very good on third down. They're very efficient. We talked about that last show. Even though everything looks ugly, like, they never stop moving forward. And DeAndre Hopkins is going to aid in that effort. But I think Chiefs fans need to temper their expectations. Like, he's not going to be 2019 DeAndre Hopkins. He won't even be 2021 DeAndre Hopkins. He's going to be the older Anquan Bolden type, right? The on-ball receiver. In some ways, he's going to be a power slot if they line him up inside. And, in 2012, Anquan Boldin, when the Ravens won the Super Bowl, he had like 900 yards in the entire regular season. And then he kind of activated that old man strength in the playoffs and had a great playoff run, which I think is what the Chiefs are hoping for here. But like, this is not going to be DeAndre Hopkins transforming the offense. It's just going to be DeAndre Hopkins playing a role to make sure the offense can keep doing what it was already doing before all their guys got hurt.
And I think Patrick Mahomes is going to elevate Hopkins in a way that we've seen other great quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers in his MVP stretch in Green Bay playing with, in some cases, a bunch of guys around him down the roster, making them look extremely good, made all those guys a bunch of money as they went elsewhere and signed free agent deals. DeAndre Hopkins has already made his money, but ideally the role he's going to have in the offense is very much like I envision it like Juwan Jennings in San Francisco, right? A little more outside than inside. Like you said, they can line him in up inside and he can win with power slot, but he typically lines up outside more. But he plays that same reliable, what we call third and Juwan role. And the Chiefs need that. They don't need it all the time, but they're going to need 3 or 4 of those a game. And DeAndre Hopkins can still do that. Is he going to do a little bit on top of that? Probably, because Patrick's going to find him and he's a veteran guy. And if they establish a quick rapport, which Mahomes seems to do with a lot of receivers, not all receivers, but I think he can add a little bit of spice. But what he's really there for is to keep 3 or 4 drives moving per game with a big physical contested catch. And he's been the best at that for a long time. Again, the other skills have declined around that, so it's not as wide an envelope to succeed in, but it is pivotal. It is important. The Chiefs could use it. It's a good move by them. It was a little more expensive, actually, than I thought it was going to be. And I think that's always the way these things work out, because it's who's taking on the salary and, how much are you willing to give up in trade capital for that, give and take. But overall, he's going to come in. He's going to be a pivotal piece, and they hope so down the stretch, right? I believe that you're correct, that they want him to activate later in the year that sort of Anquan Boldin magic of like, I'm going to extend 3 or 4 drives that are going to get us over the hump in a game where we really need it. And if he does that, I think Brett Veach and the Chiefs would be very happy with it. Chiefs fans might not be if he has very lackluster production for the first, 6 weeks or something, but come the time of the year when the Chiefs really start caring about football, if he makes plays down the stretch, he's going to be an automatic Kansas City legend.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal here, right? Like, the Chiefs don't measure the value of this trade in how many yards he gets in November. They measure the value of this trade is, in does he make the play we need him to make in mid-January? That's what determines whether or not this is going to be a success. And ultimately, I think it will be, because DeAndre Hopkins is one of the most reliable receivers of his generation. And he's also never played with a quarterback as good as Patrick Mahomes either. So, I think this is going to work out just fine. Even if we don't see the fruits of it now, we will see the fruits of it eventually. And also, as a side note, as a Texans fan, I'm happy for DeAndre, because this is his best chance he's ever going to have to get a ring. And, he's in that kind of territory in his career when you're looking back on production and awards and everything like that, where he might make the Hall of Fame, but winning a Super Bowl would really, really help the case. So if DeAndre Hopkins is going to get into the Hall, I think this trade specifically is going to be his ticket to do that. So I'm happy for him. He's got a real shot to be a champion for the first time in his very long, very illustrious career, and that's awesome for him. A much younger player also got moved this week. Very talented player, a player that I still don't know why he's not a Los Angeles Ram, because they need help at linebacker and they traded away their best one. That's Earnest Jones. He was another Tennessee Titans trade as part of that kind of fire sale this week, which, by the way, side note, Titans gave up. Titans very much gave up. They're doing the same thing the Commanders did last year, where they realized they weren't going to make it and they just jettisoned everything that had value, and they're like, fuck it, we're going to tank. And the Commanders are in a much better spot this year, but the Titans realized that the Levis thing is not working, so we're going to get rid of the pieces that have value. We're going to try to get picks. We're going to try to clean up our books. They gave up. But Ernest Jones was another piece who they just acquired a couple months ago from the Rams with intentions to make him a long-term piece. And then they were so bad, they're like, fuck it. Like, we're not a linebacker away. So they sent him to Seattle. Seattle's had a lot of issues at linebacker this year. You could argue their run defense, or rather their lack of run defense, is in part because their linebacking core was really bad. And also Mike Macdonald, who historically is a defensive mind that likes to blitz his linebackers a lot, wasn't really able to blitz his linebackers this year because they weren't very good at it. And I've never seen a Mike Macdonald defense be 26th in terms of linebacker pass rush snaps, but Seattle is. And I think it's because he just didn't trust them to win. Now he's got Ernest Jones, who's one of the best blitzing linebackers in all of football, and also a better run defender and a better coverage defender than anybody they had on the team. Like, this instantly upgrades the entire Seahawks defense at every level. And I think it's also going to unlock a new style of defense where they actually get aggressive with their linebackers because now they have a guy that can actually do it.
It's a guy that can play all of those roles and had a lot of the pass coverage responsibilities when Bobby Wagner was with the Rams. Most of those fell to Ernest Jones, and he did them very, very well. It's one of the reasons that he was, valuable in a trade to the Titans when they thought they were going to be building for something and hoping that the Levis experiment was working out. Like you said, they clearly got past that and moved him on. It's a great landing spot for Jones, and it's a really good landing spot for Mike Macdonald as well, because as you said, his defenses have been sort of keystoned or linchpinned around good linebacker play. This is a guy that, was instrumental in going out and saying, no, we're going to get Roquan Smith and we're going to pay him a boatload of money because our defense requires inside linebackers that are dynamic, that are versatile, that can do a lot of things and really impact the game at a time when a lot of the rest of the league was kind of trying to hide their inside linebackers. Certainly not pay them at top dollar for the most part and say, hey,
cough, Rams.
Yeah, we'll push that into corner. We'll push that into defensive line. We have other priorities than inside linebacker. And Mike Mack bucked that trend and said, nope, we don't really have certainly monetarily a higher priority on our defense than the guy that's going to be keying it from the inside. Clearly didn't think he had that in Seattle. Both the results showed that. And I think frustration of the fans about, hey, isn't this a defensive coach? And he's like, yeah, but pretty tough to bake bread without flour. So I got to get some better ingredients. He goes out and does that. And then the sort of icing on that particular cake, to stay with the baking analogies for some strange reason, is they go out and sign another linebacker off the Ravens practice squad, who he's familiar with. And that to me was the real kicker of like, oh, they really didn't like what they had at linebacker. They didn't just dip, they double dip. They're changing that guard because they're not getting the production they want on the field and not feeling, as you said, like they're allowed to do the things that make their defense as effective as it can be in its best version or playing as its best self. So the Ernest Jones trade, I think, is going to be really good for both parties. Jones gets out of a sinking ship. Mike Mack gets a guy that he can load a bunch more responsibilities on and expect him to win. And, it's always nice when you see trades. I guess it's not win-win. The Titans get kind of what they wanted, but for the wrong reasons. Seattle gets a couple of things that really might help them down the stretch.
I mean, the best win for the Titans is that they flipped Earnest for a higher asset than what they just acquired him for 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So in that sense, the investment, I guess, paid off for 2 months. But clearly I think they'd rather just have a good football team, but they don't, and that's what happens when you swing and miss on quarterback. And I respect that they took a swing, but they missed. So back to the drawing board, going to try to get another one this year, whether it's a veteran, like let's say Minnesota, for whatever reason, let Sam Darnold walk out the door. I could see them making a play for Sam Darnold. And if not, Carson Beck, come on down. He said very anxiously.
Let's hold that talk for a little bit. But yeah, they are going to be taking another swing. I think that became clear. We were teetering. We're like, do they see it the same way we see it earlier? And after this week, we're like, yes, they do. They see it the same way we see it.
One quick note, and then we'll get right back to the show. You guys are very familiar with Manscaped at this point because they've supported us forever. But they did just release a brand new addition to their grooming line that you might be interested in called the Chairman Pro, which is an old school electric foil shaver that can give you a professional shave right at home. You can use either the skin-safe 4-blade foil for a smooth finish, or if you want a stubble look, they have multiple options for the stubble trimmer to give you either a 1 to 2 day look or a 3 to 4 day look, depending on your preference. It's also waterproof, so you can use it in the shower if you want, and it makes it easier to clean too because you can just rinse it under the sink. It also, of course, has an LED spotlight so you can see every hair you're trying to shave, and it has up to 75 minutes of runtime. So if you're in need of a new shaver to maintain your stubble or to have a fresh and smooth face every single day, check out the Chairman Pro at Manscaped. And of course, check out everything else they have to offer too, whether it's body trimmers, lotion, shave gels, nose hair trimmers. I mean, you name it, they have it when it comes to grooming. You can see it all at manscaped.com, and if you use promo code BOOTLEG, you'll also get a 20% off discount and free shipping on your order. Again, that is manscaped.com, promo code BOOTLEG. That will give you 20% off and free shipping on whatever you get. Thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring today's show, and with that, let's get back to it. All right, let's get into our trade proposals, and again, we're doing this on Thursday morning, October 24th. So these have not happened yet, or at least nothing has happened with these players yet. Forgive us if it happens by the time this comes out tomorrow. But these are trade proposals to playoff contenders to find their own missing piece. Like, say, DeAndre for KC and Earnest for Seattle. We're not just throwing out, put superstar on super team here. Like, let's talk about substantive trades that make a difference for teams that really, really need it. My first trade, and this is unfortunate that it even has to be done because a few days ago it didn't. And this is for Tampa Bay to fill in their wide receiver need, which is a fresh need with the injury to Godwin as well as the injury to Mike Evans. They need receiver now if they want to keep pace in the NFC. And there's two ways they can do it. They can do it the expensive way, or they can do it the cheap way.
Okay.
So I'm kind of throwing out a 2-for-1. The expensive way is you call up the Rams and you say, hey, Cooper Kupp's on the block. You're willing to pay the salary. They want a second-round pick. I don't know if they're going to give him a second-round pick, but let's debate the compensation later. Like they'll go back and forth on that. But they say, hey, Cooper Kupp fits what we need, a really smart, sure-handed slot receiver that's also dynamic after the catch. He blocks his ass off. Like, he fits Tampa Bay perfectly. And, by the way, he already knows the language because it's Liam Cohen.
Right.
They use the same verbiage. So, like, I'm talking about hitting the ground running. He would get it. The cheap way, wildly different direction. It's going after a former high-ish pick who, I don't want to say through no fault of his own, but he just happens to be in a very loaded receiving core where he is fourth on the pecking order, even if on a lot of other teams he probably wouldn't be. And that is Christian Watson up in Green Bay. Would be significantly cheaper than a former Triple Crown winner. He's still in a rookie deal. He'd be playing for an extension, and it would be good for Watson to go to Tampa Bay and maybe play a featured role here to try to up his market value as he gets closer and closer to needing an extension. But he's extremely talented, like physically gifted, super explosive. We know Baker would give him chances deep down the field because it's Baker Mayfield. And, going back to his time at North Dakota State, like, he's a good blocker as well. And you can kind of use him on jet sweeps and stuff too. So I think there is expensive and, I don't want to say guaranteed success, but high likelihood of success versus cheap, high upside swing that we hope to survive with until Mike gets back. Out of those two options, which one intrigues you the most?
Well, I'll say first that we didn't talk about these trades beforehand. That was sort of key. We both went to our own little laboratories and came up with these trades. So we're going to get a bit of a 360 on wide receiver for Tampa Bay because that was also one of the positions I filled. It was neither of these two guys. So we're going to see
give me yours. Give me yours.
I will. But I'll answer your question first about out of Kupp. who I did consider, and I do want to say to all the people out there who say, well, what's the difference between the Rams and the Bucs, right? They both have injuries at wide receiver. They could both be in the market. And the difference is situation. The Rams are behind the eight ball. They've lost a lot of games in the early going. The Bucs, on the other hand, are right, they're nipping at the division lead. It's very winnable. They could absolutely take the NFC South. So that, yes, they have both had massive injuries at wide receiver. Rams are getting a little bit healthier with Kupp coming back, but the impetus to make a trade like this, to give up capital, comes from where you're at within the season. It is completely sort of position and situation dependent. And the Bucs situation is very different than the Rams is in their own division. So that's why the Rams would be sellers and the Bucs would be buyers to start off with. It's interesting because it really depends on what they want from Williams and Godwin on the backside of this. Now, Godwin, there is a report yesterday that he might, slim chance, even be back if they stay late in the playoffs, that he could be back this year. Dislocated ankle, no fun. I don't think he would be 100%. So what are they thinking about long-term for both of those players? Because if you're going to go the Kupp route, I don't think it's a rental. I don't think you're bringing him in for, 8 games, right? You're thinking about, okay. And then you literally have Godwin, Evans, and Kupp on the roster potentially next year. That's
Godwin, I think, is in the last year of his deal, so it really depends.
Is he in the last
on
year?
What they want.
Okay,
I think it's either this year or next year. I think it's this year's the last year.
Okay, if it's this year, it makes more sense. If it's next year, you do end up with kind of a logjam salary wise and out of position, and you're also very veteran. So yes, you drafted Jalen McMillan, and you're hoping he develops here in this absence, but. I didn't look that far into it. It was one of the reasons I stay away from Kupp, because it would be more expensive regardless than either of the options I looked at or your other option.
I just looked at it. Mm-hmm. So it is the last year, right? Godwin is the last year, but he's got 3 void years on the back end. So the dead money is 18.8. So they're kind of incentivized to do an extension as it is, because he's only 28.
Right.
So you could 29. And you could stretch it.
Yeah. So that was what I was
maybe they are
about.
looking for more of a rental type situation.
Or just something quite a bit cheaper, because when you're structuring, Jason Light's done a very good job of this in Tampa Bay. When you're structuring a roster, putting that much capital in one position, any one position, is very difficult. And if you're going to end up with a kind of financial logjam, which they might if they bring on Kupp, then thinking down the road, yeah, we need something for this year to put us over the top, but we also don't want to sort of push all the chips into the middle of the table at wide receivers. So in that way, I think I would probably do Watson of your 2 options. He is young, he is explosive, he's got a lot going for him. I think the draft compensation might be a little bit more expensive because of the potential, but the financial compensation, obviously a lot less. He's still on a rookie deal. So
who is yours?
I have 2. I also went with a sort of this or that option, but they are closer to the middle. You went to the high end of veteran production and sort of rookie potential. I went with, again, looking at, they have 2 of the best receivers in the game when healthy. If they think both of those guys are going to come back, what could we get that would give us a boost this year? Because they certainly need it. They've got a lot of talent off the board right now on injured reserve. I went with Mike Williams or Darius Slayton.
Slayton, I think, would make a lot of sense for just how Baker Mayfield plays football. Like, the man's never seen a go route he didn't want to throw.
Yep. And it's 2 different players. Again, we talked about Hop being a certain type of player. Mike Williams is a similar type of player with, I think, a little bit more juice. He's not as old as Hop, but he plays a similar role. He is going to win contested jump balls down the sideline. Like, that's Mike Williams in a nutshell. So if you want that, which is quite frankly a little bit more of the Evans role and a little bit less of the Godwin role, there's a balance there too. Like, which guy do you think Jalen McMillan is going to replace? Like, in my mind, knowing what I know about Jalen McMillan, he is more Godwin than he is Evans. So if you're looking for a replacement, you're looking for something more Evans, and that might lean towards Mike Williams in this situation. Slayton offers a little bit more burst, like you said. He loves going deep. And I think I'd lean towards Slayton because he's going to give you that little bit more juice, and Baker's your quarterback. And now you have two guys in McMillan and Slayton that offer you a very different kind of combo platter for Liam Cohen to dial some stuff up and not really tip off defenses and say, oh, well, the big post-up guy's over there and the dynamic, possibly slot, down the field guy is over here. We're going to rotate our defense this way. If you have Slayton on one side and McMillan on the other, and then, pick your choice of who's left for slot receiver, like whichever red shirt is left standing gets the third receiver role in Tampa Bay. But that would be, I think, more interesting to Cohen because he would have a little bit more balance and the capability really to go deep effectively on either side, across the middle of the field. It doesn't just have to be down the sideline.
I'm curious about Darius Slayton in terms of his next big deal because he is on the last year of his contract. So that would kind of fall into the whole rental space, right? Because you wouldn't have to worry about figuring out him versus Godwin when you're already thinking like maybe you would extend Godwin anyway and make him a buck for life, just like Mike's a buck for life. But I'm curious to see how that would affect Slayton's market for this coming offseason. Because, again, if you get a featured role in Tampa as a vertical threat for a quarterback like Baker, like that could make a pretty big difference in Darius Slayton's future wallet as well. So I'm not sure if the Giants are ready to go full fire sale. I think one more loss would do it. But if they lose this weekend, I wouldn't be surprised if Slayton gets moved. Because at that point, they're like, fuck it, we're giving up.
And if you're Slayton,
they have nothing else.
Yeah, and if you're Slayton, you're going from Daniel Jones to Baker Mayfield. That's a bit like DeAndre Hopkins going from Will Levis, to Patrick Mahomes. It's not the same level, but it's like
slightly bigger market.
Yeah, it's like that looks better over there to me. Again, a guy looking for a deal who we've seen play at a high level in the league. It's not like, oh, he's still waiting for his breakout. Like we've seen Slayton have good receiving years, put him with a quarterback that could really leverage his strengths, and it would be a lot of fun. So those are my choices.
All right, my second trade here.
If you go same position, same team, I'm going to just die.
Maybe. Well, is it Commanders?
No, it's not. Okay,
cool. We're good.
Cool.
But I really wanted to try to find one in the AFC, and I was like, who can I try to fit and I felt like a lot of the AFC playoff contenders are actually pretty complete. There's not a whole lot of big holes with most of those teams. And so I went with another NFC team, and that's the Commanders, like I said. They really need corner. Like desperately need corner.
Yeah.
So I was hunting around for corners that are going to be free agents either this year or next year that are on teams that might be looking to do a fire sale. And one name was screaming at me from the top of that list. That is J.C. Horn. J.C. Horn's had a great year, really high forced and completion rate, about 22%. He plays press, he plays off, he's healthy, he's very talented. I think as far as man corners go, there's no way the Commanders are going to get a better one in the trade market than J.C. Horn because most of those guys are not available. But because it's Carolina, he might be, right? Because they are so far away that, they're like, he might not fit onto our timeline. So let's get an asset out of J.C. Horn while we can because Carolina is going to be loading up with assets to try to get a quarterback here. So J.C. Horn to the Commanders for insert probably day 2 pick here, whether it's a 2, whether it's a 3, I don't care. And then he would be in line to get an extension in Washington long-term for a much better team in a much better situation. When was the last time we said Washington was a better situation? So I think it's good for the player. I think it's good for the team. Commanders are really trying to go on a run here in the NFC, but the thing they desperately need is corner to keep every game from being a shootout here. I think it makes sense for all parties, including the Panthers.
I would agree. And this isn't the Panthers don't like J.C. Horn. The Panthers do like J.C. Horn. But as you said, you have to be realistic about where you are as a team and whether or not J.C. Horn is still going to be there playing at a high level at this point, needing a much larger salary because he is on that do we pay him or don't sort of teeter point. And you just have to look at it as the general manager and go, is this guy still going to be helping us at the level that is equal to that compensation when the rest of us are ready. And the Panthers' answer, if you're being realistic right now, unless something tremendously wild happens, is nah, it's not going to balance out like that. We're going to have a large contract on the books that's going to be declining in value about the time that we're ready to contend if everything goes the way we think it might. So it is good. I was on a Commanders podcast this week, talking about Commanders Bears. The host was really level, super smart, and we got to talking about the defense, and I mentioned the corners, and it was the only time in like 45 minutes his eyes dropped. He was just like, and I was like, oh, okay, I won't press on the nerve. Like everybody knows, including you, that they're not playing super well right now. And I'm with you. He could play their style. He would instantly be the best corner in the room. I don't think that's at all debatable. And if he plays really well for Washington, that new regime could reward him for that and make him one of their centerpieces on defense moving forward. That is very needed. And in a way, that also helps their young cornerback, because if Jaden Daniels doesn't have to put up 35 or 40 every week because the secondary, knocks one or two of those touchdowns off, good for them.
Who is yours?
My second trade was pass rush for Cincinnati. They desperately need it. And they are teetering on, hey, we're kind of looking spunky here. We could be competitive. We are not out of it. We have Burrow. We have our receiving core. But our defense has played better over the last 2 weeks, but it is Hendrickson versus the world. It's not pretty in terms of pass rush. They need some help. Now, here's the decision point for that. You can go inside or you can go outside. Pick your flavor. They could use both, but I'm not talking about both. That wasn't the rules. We get to pick one. So if you're inside, my candidate is Sebastian Joseph Day. And if you think it's more outside, it's Harold Landry.
I think both of those, and specifically because it's the Bengals, I think it's about, to be frank, how cheap it is. I think both of those are relatively cheap acquisitions. Right. So, because if they wanted to pay Trey Hendrickson, they could pay Trey Hendrickson, but they seemingly just haven't wanted to do that until they absolutely have to. And Harold Landry's already been paid. Mm-hmm. It's more just about acquiring something that's already been paid versus having to pay top dollar, very, very top dollar for Trey Hendrickson, because he's going to get, if I had to guess, he's going to want $30 million a year.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's what,
and he deserves it, quite frankly.
Yeah. That's what top 10 pass rushers are going to cost now. So if we're going for something that's a complementary piece to Trey Hendrickson that isn't going to cost as much as, say, I don't even want to throw Max Crosby out there. They would never trade for Max Crosby, but you know what I'm talking. Brian Burns. Let's say Giants go full fire sale. They're not going to acquire Brian Burns because Brian Burns is very expensive. Harold Landry, not as much. Also, Harold Landry isn't as good as Brian Burns, but he's better than what the Bengals have.
Yes,
and that ain't saying much.
So they need both. And, Bengals fans, let us know in the comments what you think they need, inside or outside more. They certainly could use both. And Sebastian Joseph Day is a player that we've liked for years, somewhat unheralded, but very good at his job, would also be an upgrade on the inside, would help some with the run defense, keep the linebackers a little bit cleaner, and, still provide a little bit of pass rush. But Landry is certainly the flashier, straight up pass rush option. Also plays the run. He's improved in that since he's entered the league. And yes, as you said, better than anything the Bengals have there now, and could be a piece that, much like we just talked about with Washington, would take a little bit of pressure off that offense, not to just have to throw up 30 or 35 to win every week. Maybe they could throw up, 25 and still win. We'll see. But right now, Lou Anarumo's options are pretty limited in terms of, hey, I want to dial a pass rush. That right now just means committing more people to it, because the people he's got up front rushing with 4, you're not going to get a lot of pressure outside of Trey.
Ironically enough, one of the better trade targets for the Bengals in terms of acquiring pass rush is in their own division, which is why it probably won't happen. Yeah. It's Zadarius Smith.
Yeah,
but I don't think the Browns would do that. Even though the Browns are bad and they're about to probably go, they're already in fire sale mode. I just don't think they would actively want to make Cincy better, because pettiness.
Why would you?
So,
Yeah, because
why would you? Right.
I did think about right tackle for the Seahawks, but as I was doing that, I was like, it's not as fun because really quality, talented young tackles are very hard to acquire. And like an hour later, they acquired Ernest Jones, and I was like, okay, the Seahawks got their flash. We're going to be talking about them. But Seahawks fans, I realize right tackle is a need. I did think about it. And the other full disclosure behind the scenes bootleg moment, like I absolutely phoned my lifeline for the cap stuff because I suck with cap stuff. So I called Brad Spielberger and said, okay, would these work? Could they do it? Like within reason, without, selling off half their franchise. And he was like, yes, they fit. And I was like, sweet. That's all I need. I got the Brad stamp. I'm good to go. I can roll into the podcast. And you could say, I don't know if it fit under the cap. And I'd be like, Brad said. And you'd be like, okay, cool.
Full disclosure, by the way, I hit up Brad myself when we were doing the Deshaun contract insurance thing because I had never even heard of that until I talked to Brad about it. And I was like, is this accurate if I phrase it this way, this way, this way? And he's like, yeah, no, that sounds about right. And I was like, cool, because I don't know shit about this. And he knows everything because he's Brad Spielberger, which is why you should go follow him because he literally does cap stuff for a living and contract stuff for a living. All right. Fun little short and sweet episode here, EJ. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Keep this one going in the comments. We know that you have lots of teams and roles and players to fill them. Put your favorite potential trade. Try and keep it within reason in the comments. Let us know which teams you think could really be put over the hump by either a certain role or a certain player within that role if you have a favorite, because we know that you all have equally as many, if not a whole lot more good ideas than we do. We just want to see them. We're just greedy that way. Yeah,
I saw a very disgruntled Niners fan say they should jettison Nick Bosa to the Lions and tear it all down and rebuild. And I'm like, guys, we are not there yet.
Okay.
Like, not even close. Not even close.
That is pulling the pin.
Niners fans are pissed, man.
I understand.
They take on a few injuries and lose a few games and the world's ending. Dude, you were in the Super Bowl like 8 months ago. Like, calm down. Like, you're fine.
Yeah, and it wasn't the first time you were either there or threatening over the last 5 years. So take a look around the bottom of the league and just pretend that you don't want to be there for a second.
All right, fun episode. Again, not the longest one, but I kind of like these a little bit more compact thematic shows. They're easier for us to make, for sure, because we don't have to pour through down and distance data for 5 separate games. But you guys also seem to like them a little bit more as well, because they're kind of digestible as you guys are on your morning commutes. So again, we are still planning on doing that what the national media gets wrong about your team episode after week 8 that we're shamelessly ripping off from Kevin Clark. So leave some more of those suggestions down in the comments below. Thank you once again to Manscaped. Thank you to Homage, our clothing partner. Thank you to Underdog. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Thank you to our bootleg executive producers on Patreon. I think that's about it, EJ. With that, let's get out of here and prepare for a damn good week of football. We'll see you soon.